Hey, you're back for lesson 5. This one's on building team culture, possibly one of the harder things to try to do. So first up, you're going to understand what tilt is and learn some ways to manage it. There are a lot of other coaching sessions out there on this exact same topic too, so you can go into more depth with this. Next up, we're going to look at how to build a team culture around good, positive communication, shared goals, and try to replace some of the toxicity that's prevalent in solo queue and online behavior. And make sure that kids have enough ownership of the team and what it's doing to help you move things forward. You're not having to shoulder all the responsibility all the time. Last up, we're going to think about how to plan inclusively so that you get a broad range of kids in your program and retain them successfully, as well as kind of branch out and establish yourself in your community and get some connections going there. So, first up, what is tilt? Originally, it was a poker term. It's when you start to get in a bad frame of mind and play worse and worse and worse. Kind of a self reinforcing process, too, once it gets out of control. And you guys have probably seen some of the bad behavior on display as far as rage quitting. That is kind of an extreme example of what tilt is. It doesn't have to look like that, though. Now, what's more interesting is you've probably heard by now about the study by the German university on esports players that was tracking pro heart rates between 140 and 180 beats per minute during competitive gameplay, which is insane. Um, and what that is that's actually kind of an amygdala mediated response. It's using mainly cortisol and also adrenaline. It's a full on stress and fight or flight response. Cortisol with the stress, adrenaline with fight or flight, but they're both kind of doing the same thing, which is energizing the body and getting it just geared up into overdrive. So what's weird is you don't think of esports as kind of like a physically demanding activity, but it is. And 2 hours of gameplay can you leave you kind of mentally energized but physically drained at the same time. And if kids aren't aware of that and aren't managing that well, that stress and strain on their body can actually kind of change their emotions too, all hooked together. So what you're looking out for is a variety of different things, not necessarily as pronounced as the infamous rage quit, but you're looking at anger, sadness, and frustration for starters. And you're looking at this idea called ranked anxiety, which is when kids are avoiding something, in this case, ranked play, because they are basically just scared of losing, and they have had loss reinforced over and over in the way that they respond to kind of setbacks. So it's all about learning from setbacks and doing the right thing at that point. So, how do you know that tilt is happening? First up, we mentioned that there's a lot of stress on the body. And if you just keep playing and playing and playing, your gameplay is going to kind of get better and better for the first 2 hours. And then after that, it's going to drop off precipitously. What they need are wellness breaks, and they don't always take them. So I just tell my kids get up, walk around, get a drink of water, listen to music, talk to some friends, come back in 10 minutes. That's all they need is breaks between games for this particular issue. And of course, keeping their session below like those 5+ hour marathon levels. Um, okay, next up is if they feel like they're not in control. This has to do with self-determination theory. If they feel like they can influence the outcome of a game, then they'll keep trying hard. They'll persevere. But if they feel like the game outcome is in their teammates' hands and not theirs, if they feel like they have no influence over their situation, it shuts down that perseverance really fast. So that basically, if they feel hopeless, that's kind of like the clue. Next up, if they're focused entirely on winning and not necessarily improving, this goes to that Carol Dweck mindset that we all have read about as educators. But it's a big thing here. If they intend to get better and intend to play and see it as a positive challenge, then they're not going to get hung up on the loss in the same way that if their only goal was just to win over and over again. Last up, some of your kids are going to be more predisposed, and some of your kids are going to be more immune to this based on kind of whatever predisposition they've already got. So there's that too. Okay, so how do you manage this? Like we said, they've got to have a good focus, good mindset. They need to clear their head and kind of be present. And so you can start with a mindfulness activity, which can be incorporated into your wellness activities too. Next up, they need a break in between every game. It doesn't have to be long, but it has to be something. And then identifying purposeful practice and playing to improve is really big. They don't want to be playing to win, although that can be a goal too. That shouldn't be the focus. In fact, one more interesting session I had was I had, I think, my A team playing against my B team. And this is just a lopsided game. And my B team is also known to tilt. So they lost, And I talked to them all, and I set the goal for them of losing slower the second time they played through. And one of the kids was definitely like the weakest member on the team, practically brand new to the game at the point when we started this. They're like, yeah, but so and so is going to lose lane, and I'm like, okay, well, let's talk about like the slow leak in the dam. Make sure you plug that leak, or it's going to gush through. So you guys have to figure out how to plug that leak, or it's going to start pouring through to all the other lanes as well. They thought about it. They came up with some strategies. They set a goal of losing in like 35 minutes instead of 30 minutes, and with a KDA ratio that wasn't quite as bad. And they hit that goal and they felt really good about this game. Like they were stoked that they actually did it. And they're like, yeah, Mr. Worden, it was working. So having a goal when you're losing that's reasonable, that you can actually achieve, gives you that self-determination back, that kind of, ability to actually influence the outcome in a way that's meaningful and positive, and demonstrates that they're actually improving. So a when-losing goal has become a big thing of mine. Well, if we're losing, then let's at least try to accomplish this. And by the way, NASEF has a whole bunch of coaching directed around tilt management and other stuff like this. So you can check out some of their webcasts. They're not all available all the time. Some of them are on Twitch, some of them are on the main website. It's also the focus of pretty much every coaching camp I've been to, at least one of the main topics. Okay, next up, toxicity. Some people on the internet say horrible things. I've had a student do it too, not respond to coaching on it, and eventually got himself kicked out of this. So that's a bad thing. What we can do, though, is we can enforce the code of conduct. Every league has one. They're crystal clear. And every league has consequences, has officials, everybody's watching out for this. You can make it crystal clear to your kids what the expectations are and then enforce it. And again, try to work with the kid as much as you can. I've only ever had to kick out one kid, and he eventually got, older, wiser, more mature, thought about his evil ways, and came back to the club a year later, totally reformed. So next up, focus on team performance, not individual performance. When a kid is gloating that they carried the team and everybody else was doing awful and they still won, that is not a positive statement to make. That kid needs some coaching. Try some team building activities, some ways to discuss things, some ways to just bond interpersonally. One thing I was proud of my A team for doing was before a match, just all walking half a mile to the supermarket, getting a bunch of food, eating it on the way back, and just talking and being really casual, not stressed out. And like, was that time playing a game? Was it scouting? Was it stats? No, it was just team bonding time. So that was awesome. Next up, we found a pro team actually communicating before, during, and after a match. We found a recording of this. We watched it and compared it to what our teams were doing, just as a way to think about how to communicate well, and also how to accept criticism, how the pros are responding to that. Kind of an awesome role model example. And then last up, to value the organization and develop a sense of school pride, and understand that kids are representatives of their school, just like with any other sports team. We need to make sure that kids know they are not anonymous. They are part of that school. That last up, that the identity of gamers who smash keyboards and shout horrible things on the internet, of which there are many bad examples, unfortunately, is not the identity that's going to be successful in esports. Esports is built around professionalism and sportsmanship, and that's just not acceptable. So again, it goes back to that first point, which is enforce the code of conduct. Next up, how to develop student ownership around the activities the club is doing. This actually matches good management across the board for like the business community. What you want to do is be an elegant manager. You don't want to overmanage or undermanage. Make sure that you've got everything organized and that kids are very clear on what the expected outcome is, and then delegate it out and give them a lot of room to do that. Give them enough support too that it's like optimally challenging. That they're having to grow their skill set, but not like so over challenged that they can't handle it. And then last up, make sure that the kids are getting recognition for what they're doing. We don't want our esports teams to be invisible on campus. So the sooner you can get some jerseys and a banner up, the better. Make sure they have a nice space to play in if you can. That material stuff does matter. And, reach out to your community for grants and sponsorships if you can. And then next up, make sure that kids are getting recognition for their leadership roles. I have a portion of my website dedicated to some of our outstanding leadership so they can refer to it on college or job application. Make sure that kids are getting some applause when they do something amazing, some recognition from their peers, And last up, try to send out an all staff email from time to time, just to let the rest of the teachers know who the kids are that are participating and maybe a couple amazing things that they did in the past couple weeks. When they get recognition from their other teachers too, who aren't necessarily their coach, that's awesome. All right, last up, inclusivity. How do we appeal to a broad audience? We don't just want that core group of competitive gamers. We want to include people from all across your school campus, especially kids that may not be involved in other extracurricular activities or may not be well connected to campus life, including some of those at risk kids. Well, one thing we can do is we can make sure that socioeconomics aren't a problem. So, what I've got here is a list of some of the free alternatives or mobile platform alternatives to the main games. Now, will they be able to get into a mainstream league sanctioned tournament using this type of game? No, but they can still participate, still hone their skills. They can still play as a club, and you may be able to host your own tournaments for those titles instead of the main ones. Next thing too is we know that uh, there there are definite preference differences across the genders, statistically speaking. So you might want to include some casual and alternative titles in your gameplay, not just the competitive like kill each other titles, so that you can kind of have a broad appeal across both genders, and again, not just your core gaming group. So how do we then get the kids to actually show up? The first one is you're going to have to reach out to specific kids and specific teachers who can kind of be a gateway for those kids. So one thing you can do, and we learned this kind of the hard way through computer science and some of the high-level physics courses, which are optional, is that we had to actively recruit specific kids. We had to basically extend a personal invitation from the instructor for the kid to join that course. And this has been borne out by like STEM research in getting girls in some kinds of STEM courses and guys in other kinds across the industry. So extend a personal invitation to that kid. Let them know that they're welcome and invited, and you think they'd be a great fit for the team, and that they'll get all the support they need. They're not expected to be playing at a high level right away. And just basically get some staff to help you with this too. If you have some English language support staff, or if you have some special ed support staff, get them involved and get kids in the pipeline from across the entire demographics of the campus. Next up, make sure that you're not expecting all kids to be competitive all day, every day. There's a small group of kids that want that, but most don't. Most want to just kind of play and hang out with their friends. So make sure that you're differentiating what the goals for the different teams are. That's one reason to have a A team, a B team, and a couple more teams too that aren't even designed around tournament play. Uh, Next up, your top competitive players are a resource, but they're not necessarily skilled enough to manage newbies. So just kind of some of the interpersonal skills and some of the coaching skills. One thing that could happen is they'll have the veteran players standing behind the newbie and telling them like 100 different things they're doing wrong. That's not going to end well. You're not going to get that newbie coming back to the next session. So have a session with your veteran players on how to be a more effective coach, where veterans brainstorm what are like 2 things that the new players should focus on, and give them just 2 things. Don't give them 100 things, first of all. And secondly, like, build it around positive feedback, not negative feedback. Try to like, oh, that was good. See if you can do this even better now next time. So some basic like mini coaching sessions for your veteran players to help out your new players is something you're going to need to do. And then beyond that, if they're not productively coaching the newbies, just separate those groups. They should have different goals. They should be doing different activities. They don't have to be intermingled all the time. Might not be a positive thing, to be honest. And of course, break it up once in a while. Like once in a while, have broadly different skilled teams competing against each other for just an intra-team scrimmage. Last up, make sure that all your students are empathic in the way they send their messages. Like I said, the veteran player might have the best intent to try to help the newbie, but if they're just leveling criticism after criticism, it doesn't come across the way it was intended. And so that's something our kids need to be aware of that they aren't automatically doing. All right, so quick review. Hopefully you know what tilt is and you have some ideas on how to manage it. Hopefully you understand how to transition your kids from kind of online solo queue toxic behavior to very sportsman-like team behavior. Hopefully you know how you want to engage students in kind of the ownership of the day-to-day affairs of the club and as well as the big projects. And last up, you have some ideas of how to include more kids than you might attract just through the core competitive gaming group. Here are a couple references, and of course, there's more resources to follow on the website.